Hello, my little strangelings, and welcome back to another Ghost Bite. Built in 1897 in St. Petersburg, Russia, the Ivan Vasily had an uneventful maiden voyage, unremarkable for several years in regular shipping service as a cargo vessel. She was of regular stock at the time, hull of riveted iron plates, and decking and superstructure made of wood. Bunkers carrying enough coal for 2,500 miles of continuous steaming at roughly 8 knots. Her regular territories for her first 5 years of service were the Baltic Sea and the Gulf of Finland. Then, in 1903, she was pressed into service for the Russian war effort against Japan. She was tasked with running a cargo of war materials to Vladivostok harbor. She was to arrive in advance of several Russian warships in order to supply them with said war materials. The voyage took the Ivan Vasily through the North Sea and into the North Atlantic before steaming southward along the west coast of Africa. She refueled twice along this voyage, once in Cape Town, South Africa, before taking a route north along the east coast of Africa to load up both on cargo and coal to make the longest leg of her journey across the Indian Ocean. She intentionally overloaded herself in Zanzibar, topping off her coal bunkers as well as stocking her decks with additional sacks of coal to make the unpleasant trek across the Indian Ocean, enduring sun-drenched and humid days and equally muggy nights. This is where shit started to fall apart. The entire trip to this point was fairly ordinary in nature, but as the crew began to embark on their journey across the Indian Ocean, a sense of unease sort of suffused them all. The men on deck watch at night would sometimes feel a chill in the sultry air, saying it felt like something sinister and unseen had passed by or through them. Others reported the feeling of someone or something walking up on them or standing beside them. But of course, when they turned to speak to who they thought was one of their compatriots, no one and nothing would be there. One evening, a group of shipmates relaxing just before the change of watch saw something so horrible it shocked them to the core. The only description of the figure that remains was that it was a luminous, semi-transparent figure that appeared human, but not. Like it was wrong somehow. It walked or loped across the deck only to disappear behind one of the lifeboats. The crew was understandably unnerved, as word spread and whatever it was that was on board with them, that had seemingly possessed the ship, seemed to grow stronger for it. Just before the Ivan Vasily reached Port Arthur, a military installation Russia leased from China, whatever diabolical presence on board with the ship's crew made its move. On the night before they were set to dock, one of the deckhands let out a bone-chilling, ear-splitting, horrified scream. Panic seized the remaining crew, and sheer mindless madness-fueled panic and pandemonium ensued. For over 20 minutes, the entirety of the Ivan Vasily's crew lost themselves to a sweeping, all-encompassing madness. The men ran wildly, this way and that, across the decks, up and down steps, in and out of cargo holds and berthings, and even threw hands at one another. They beat the shit out of each other, without even knowing why. During the bout of mass psychosis, one of the men aboard, Alec Gavinsky, broke away from the fighting and lunacy and pitched himself overboard into the night-dark waters of the Indian Ocean. As soon as Gavinsky disappeared beneath the waves, the bout of hysteria stopped, just as suddenly as it had come on. Save for the absence of Alec Gavinsky and the bruised and bloody faces staring stunned at one another, it was as though nothing had happened. The men, quiet and grim, fueled the ship in Port Arthur the next day before setting out on the final leg of their journey to Vladivostok. Nothing happened the first night out from Port Arthur, which had the sailors breathing an uneasy sigh of relief. Perhaps Alec Gavinsky's sacrifice had slaked the bloodlust of the entity on board. The second night, also uneventful, further convinced the crew it was over. Alas, it was not to be so. On the third night out from Port Arthur, the madness struck again, only to once again subside with the self-deletion of one of their shipmates. When the Ivan Vasily finally docked in Vladivostok, over a dozen of her crew attempted in futility to desert the cursed vessel before her cargo hatches had even been opened. Russian soldiers held the crew at gunpoint as they unloaded, resupplied, and then said, "See y'all fucking later, get your asses to Hong Kong." The Ivan Vasily set out once again with her traumatized and horrified crew. The passage from Vladivostok to Hong Kong was what can only be described as a maritime nightmare. 4 more times the ship was gripped in madness, a waking nightmare so profound that the first 2 occurrences of this voyage wound up with a self-deletion to end it. During the third occurrence, a stoker just straight up died of fright, and the fourth? The captain of the vessel himself, Sven Angerst, threw himself overboard from the flying bridge and drowned. After docking in Hong Kong, the entire crew, with the exception of the second officer Chris Hansen and 5 Scandinavian sailors, said, "Fuck this shit, I'm out." Christ took over as captain. The Scandinavians had to have kept their mouths shut, and they replenished the rest of the crew with Chinese and Lascar men. They were then bound for Sydney, Australia. Ain't shit happened on that voyage south. I bet Christ and the Scandinavians thought they were in the clear. But then, one night out from Sydney, without explanation, Chris Hansen suck-started his firearm. Everyone disappeared themselves as soon as they hit shore this time, all except one Harry Nelson, who was serving as the ship's boatswain. With Harry's help, the company behind the Ivan Vasily found a captain that didn't believe in ghosts, which was great. Except the word had gotten out, and it took a solid 4 months to assemble a complete crew that A, had no clue about the happenings aboard the ship, or B, didn't believe it, or C, didn't care. When this feat was accomplished, they loaded up and set out to San Francisco. Their cargo this time was wool, innocuous enough. Still, within a week, the Ivan Vasily was struck by another bout of terror. 2 seamen lost it so bad they had to be confined. Both had self-deleted by morning. The following day, the captain, who didn't believe in ghosts, yeah, he suck-started his revolver too. This time, the remaining crew absolutely refused to go on, telling Harry Nelson, "Hell no, absolutely fucking not," and Harry, to his credit, agreed, "Nope," and had the Ivan Vasily turn towards Vladivostok harbor, making a beeline for the ship's company. Once docked in the Russian city, Harry and crew walked off the vessel, leaving the cargo to rot. No manner of wheeling, dealing, incentivizations, or promises of bonuses would get anyone back on board the Ship of Doom, or, as it had been coined, the Death Ship. For years, the Ivan Vasily floated, straining at her anchor chain and mooring lines, legends swirling in the harbor around her keel. No one set foot on her decks, yet reported phenomena remained. Shadowy, almost human figures were seen, and sometimes voices and screams were heard. No one knows if there was a particular incident that precipitated the Ivan Vasily's demise, but on a winter's night in 1907, the locals of Vladivostok decided there was only one cure for the evil plaguing the ship, and that was purification by fire. The men of Vladivostok towed the Ivan Vasily to the middle of the harbor and punched holes in her hull and put her wooden decks and superstructure to the flame. They stood in their sealskin coats in the bitter Russian cold and toasted the ship's demise with vodka. They say the burnt-out iron hull let out an angry, unholy, wailing scream as it slipped below the waterline. I don't know about you, my little strangelings, but this sounds like something straight out of an H.P. Lovecraft novel. Perhaps he took some inspiration from the story. Until next time, happy hauntings.